I will present not our study. I will present only a part of our study, and particularly a few issues which are important in our study. There it goes. I will look at 4 issues. I have to put my glasses on, otherwise I don't see my own. Sorry. I take this one. How did it work? Okay, this is better. I will have a look at 4 points. One is directive compliance. What is it? Yeah, what is directive compliance? Secondly, if we want to be directive compliance, we have to make directive implementation plans. Directive-specific implementation plans. The directive-specific implementation plans are based on investments. How do we come to investments? And last, information management. Looking at the directives, then we see that in 1991, we had 2 major directives. That was the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and the Nitrate Directive. They have been adjusted afterwards, but in principle they are from 1991. 1996, 1998, Drinking Water Directive and the IPPC Directive. Those are 4 basis directives. But finally, the EU said, look, we have these directives which are very specific, but we need a framework around it. The Water Framework Directive, which is from 2000, is a kind of umbrella above all the water directives. And in fact, the Water Framework Directive is saying only 2 things. Polluted waters should become clean, and clean water should stay clean. And we are going to direct our activities towards that. The directives which are under it are in fact helping this activity. And the basis, let's say, for the activity is based on river basin management plans. First, have a quick look at the Drinking Water Directive. What does it apply to? First, distribution systems. And in the directive is indicated 50, bigger than 50 people. In the Macedonian law, it is reduced to bigger than 20 people. Whether that is helpful or not, I leave it to you. Distribution systems smaller than 50 people, or 10 cubic meters per day, which is really small, if the water is supplied through an economic activity. Public utility company is an economic activity. If it is a community system which is dealt by people, yeah, and it is not an economic activity, it's not. Then the Drinking Water Directive doesn't apply. Then we have drinking water from tankers, bottles and containers, and water which is used for food industry if this water is coming into contact with the food. What are the obligations? The obligations already transposed in the Macedonian law is that we have sanitary protection zones, but we don't have them for all the water supply zones in Macedonia yet. Not for all the sources these exist. I could even say for most of the sources they don't exist. So that's an obligation which still has to be fulfilled. Adequate monitoring. And the water supply, the Drinking Water Directive indicates the water should be wholesome and clean. That is the basic issue And for that, you have to set water quality parameters, which are in principle set in the directive, which have been taken over also in the Macedonian law. The water quality has to be monitored. And what is a very important thing within the EU framework is that people have to be informed about the water quality and about potential problems with the water quality. That is an obligation which is not always fulfilled, not here in Macedonia and not here, not even in Croatia. In many countries it is still not happening, particularly many of the new member states. What the drinking directive not obliges you to do is to provide water to everybody. It's not necessary. If you provide by tanker, yeah, then it's also okay. It doesn't have to be piped water. It doesn't require losses to be reduced. Drinking water directive is not indicating that. If it is not affecting the quality, in fact, doesn't matter. Not for the directive. It doesn't require that installations are in good conditions. Also with old pipe you could supply good water, in principle. And you don't have to supply water 24 hours, 7 days a week, continuously with good pressure. The drinking water directive doesn't require that. So, what does it mean? Sorry, I was one sheet behind. What does it mean? That if we are looking at the potential for EU support in water supply, then in principle the EU support is related to compliance with the directive. That means that EU support is in principle related to ensuring that water is wholesome and clean. So, in principle, there is no money available from the EU to extend to everywhere water supply networks. In principle, I say, because financing can be possible at the moment that the financing of water supply improves the manageability of the water company. And there, today, we have heard a lot. Because if the water supply, if the losses would really reduce the manageability of a water company and even the feasibility of the water company, even in such a way that it could be bankrupt, more or less, yeah, then improvements in the system, which could improve the water company's operation, might be financeable. But you have to be very clear to the EU that it works. Having a short look at the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. 1. Applies to cities and applies to food industry in specific situations. That needs to be collected, needs to be treated, and before it goes into a river or another water body. Specifically food processing if it is not part of an urban area, at the moment that it's bigger than 4,000 PE, and sludge disposal is also regulated. But the treatment and even the collection depends on how big is the area. I still call it an area now. We are later going to call it agglomeration. How big is the area? So how big is the urban area where the wastewater is generated? And to what kind of river the water is going. Food industry, I will not further explain. And this is what I already indicated. Looking at the obligations, for me it's difficult English here and Macedonian there, sorry for that. There we are. So looking at the wastewater, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, then the directive says that for all urban areas, I call it still, above 2,000 population equivalent, you need to collect and treat. Then, dependent on the size of the area where you collect the wastewater, there are implementation deadlines, either 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or whatever. No, that is too far. Sorry, page up. Yeah, and I've given you here a table which is used in this moment in Croatia, where you see that the implementation deadlines are 2018, 2020 and 2023 for agglomerations depending on size and depending on the sensitivity of the water where the treated wastewater is going to. I can tell you, these periods are too short. Croatia is not going to be able to fulfill its obligations by 2018. Not by far. They are not going to be able to reach 2020, and perhaps they are going to be able to reach 2023 for the small ones. So, Croatia has made a program which was much too ambitious. This means that, yeah. Looking at the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, we have in fact two things. Yeah, you have an obligation for collection and treatment for compliance with the Urban Wastewater Directive, and it means at the same time that the EU can support programs or projects which are related to collection and treatment. So it is different from drinking water. Yeah? In the wastewater you see that in principle all the activities in the wastewater, as long as they are connected to compliance, can be financed. When we are looking at Macedonia, there has been done a study in 2010 by COVI, and they came to values, investment values for the whole of Macedonia between 700, 900 million euro over the whole country, and for water supply around 200 to 300 million euro. Those are enormous amounts. It means that in some ways support from donors is necessary. A lot of support from donors, and the main donor is going to be the EU for sure. However, it's not a free beer. Because if you will be a company and you would like to set up an activity and you would need money from a bank in order to set up your company, the bank will immediately ask you, what's your business plan? How are you going to do it? What is your market? Yeah? What is going to be your profit level? Are you going to sustain this business? Is this a business for a year and then you lose? Or can this be a really sustainable business? That is what the question which your bank is going to ask. Those questions are asked by the EIB. If it relates to these kind of projects, those are questions which are asked by the EBRD, and those are questions which are asked by, in principle, all the donors, including the EU. So it is not a free beer for a second reason. The EU is not going to pay everything. The EU is going to pay, let's say, around 70%, 72% maximum. Oh, that means that about 28 to 30% of the total investment, and we can calculate now, if we would like to, that would mean about 400 million on the basis of these data, money has to come from Macedonia. Has to come from the Ministry of Finance, or has to come partly from municipalities. That is a reason to say, to look at these programs very carefully and to say, okay, we can try to ask money from the EU, but we also have to go to the Ministry of Finance, and they also have to think that our business is good and that our projects are sustainable. So there are two parties in this case, yeah, which have to bring money on the table. This business plan, as I would call it, it's not a kind of business plan Ad has been talking about, but it is a program. A program of projects for the whole of Macedonia, which is then called Directive-Specific Implementation Plan, which lists all the activities which Macedonia wants to do. It gives the cost, but that's not all. It also indicates how do you want to do it, how do you want to manage it, and what is going to be the result of it. Is it sustainable? So the Directive-Specific Implementation Plan, in fact, you could call is the business plan for the implementation of projects for compliance with the EU directives. It's a different definition, but it fits very much with the discussion today. Hopla, I forgot this one again. The Directive-Specific Implementation Plan, where we are talking about and which we are developing in the moment for water and wastewater, contains a number of issues which I'm not going to completely repeat, but it tells in fact exactly, it is a document which exactly tells how are you going to do it, what are you going to do, how much is going to cost, who is going to manage it, and how are you going to manage it, and in what time frame are you going to implement it. Okay, so we have a document which indicates what we want to do, and we know how much money it is going to cost. DSIP, we call it. Then discussion is going to start with the EU. So this document is going to be on the table of the EU and is one of the main negotiation documents for this field, at least. That means that the document serves two purposes. One, that you say to the partner at the other side of the table, your discussion partner, the EU, you say, okay, this is my program. So much money I want to have, and I want to implement it in so much time. Oh, I want to implement it in 20 years because otherwise I cannot finance it. No, the EU is going to say you have to implement it in 15 years. Yeah, but then we cannot finance it. That's going to be too quick. We are not able to do that. So you discuss two things. One, how much money do you need? Two, how much time you will need to implement the program. And there I refer back to Croatia. They have been bad negotiators. I say it with a laugh, but they have been bad negotiators relating the timing. Yeah? I don't say this negative, it's not meant negative, I word there, so. Regarding the implementation time, you have to be realistic. Yeah, and that is one of the major issues with the Directive-Specific Implementation Plan, that is to have a realistic plan. Okay, how are we going to come there? In our project. This is a sheet from the very beginning of the project, not changed because it's still valid. And I tell you where we are in the sheet. First, I have a quick look at the water supply zones. We need to know where are the water supply zones, so which areas have water supply, what is the condition of the water supply, then what is the water quality, what is the risk, and on the basis of that you come to, in fact, to this investment program. We cannot do that ourselves. We need the public utility companies and the municipalities in that process because they know what's there. We don't know what's there. We can only rely on their information. And immediately I can refer to other discussions today. The asset database is not really what you would like to be. It's quite bad. So, If we have this whole list at the left side, you have to go through a priority setting, and that priority setting gives you what am I going to do first, how much is going to cost, and what time frame do I have. And that is then finally the basis for the DSIP. Wait a second. Oh, sorry. Page up, page up. Yeah, I forgot this sheet. Sorry, I went over it. This is for wastewater. For wastewater, I'm not going to explain. You see, it is exactly the same scheme where we go through from data to projects to priority setting to DSIP. In this moment, for both, we are in the phase of collecting as much as possible, as many as possible data from the public utility companies. We have a reasonable basis, but it should be improved still. An important issue for wastewater is that we are talking about agglomerations. I first indicated here urban areas, etc. I didn't want to use the word agglomeration yet, because it's very often misunderstood. So how is the directive defining agglomeration? It says it's an area which is sufficiently concentrated for wastewater to be able to be collected and be transferred to one point. Now, I can tell you there are 100,000 interpretations to this statement, and even documents have been made to explain what it could be, to explain what the agglomeration might be. And in different countries, they are looking at it in a different way. Romania has done quite some work on this together with Jaspers, and they have developed a wonderful document about that. And to be honest, I think that the Romanian approach is the best. You can have not only one agglomeration with one wastewater treatment plant, you can have one agglomeration with two wastewater treatment plants, or one wastewater treatment plant with 2 or 3 agglomerations. Yeah, that's the Romanian approach, which has meanwhile, let's say, been taken over in the EU. Why is that? Let's take Skopje. Skopje is one big agglomeration, we cannot go around that, but Skopje will most probably have at least 2 wastewater treatment plants. So it will be one agglomeration with 2 wastewater treatment plants. Okay, now I have something which is a little bit on a hill, and this would flow in this direction, that would flow in that direction, but it's this a city on a hill. So can I cut that in 2 and say one part is going to one wastewater treatment plant, so the other part to the other wastewater treatment plant, and that means that I have 2 agglomerations? No. For the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, you cannot do that. How did we develop this? We went with maps, topographic maps, with very detailed information, the local maps, with very detailed information about what the areas are which have, in some way, urbanization. You see here a little piece. If we put the orthophoto under it, you see that the actual topo map does not cover completely what is actually urbanized or where people are living. So after this, we have corrected for all the agglomerations. We have corrected that, and this is going to be the final agglomeration. This is where at least people are living. In this way, we have defined. What? In this way, we have defined the strategy. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, didn't recognize it, sorry. So now the discussion about the agglomeration comes, because what can be done, and what has been done in several countries, that is that the agglomerations are much too big. And at the moment that you make your agglomerations much too big, it means that you have an obligation, and more obligations than you would have if you would have your agglomeration as small as possible. So in order to protect, let's say, Macedonia from over-investment, and to be anyway within the line the EU is setting in the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, we are going for the minimum solution, in the sense of make the agglomerations as small as possible. And only extend if there is a good reason for it. But start small. What is small? That is that you do not connect all kind of urban areas together if they are separate. Because the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive indicates that if it is areas which are separate, then they are not sufficiently concentrated. Yeah, so you can keep them apart. So we have used 150 meters in between urbanization areas for small and 250 for big agglomerations. We have said if the density is less than 4 houses, it's not dense enough. And in fact, in the final feasibility studies, it has to anyway be reviewed. And then €2,000 per connected PE is more or less regarded to be the absolute threshold. So now we can do our best to minimize. Later on in the feasibility study, you have to do a final evaluation to see whether this threshold of €2,000 is not overseeded. Here the discussions come with the municipalities, and I know them from very closely. Because people are thinking, it is anyway financed by the EU, so let's invest as much as possible. They don't realize themselves that they have to pay 30% from the national budget. So to go that way is not a very clever choice for Macedonia. This sheet indicates, I don't know which place it was, it's indicated somewhere, but this indicates very clearly a line, yeah, the green one, where you see it is a concentrated area, and then the question is, would this area here also be part of the agglomeration? No, absolutely not, because it's not concentrated enough. Hopla. Why is this not working? Page down. Yeah. Here Bitola, in fact, yeah, and this is already a thing which has gone, yeah, because already studies have been done, but anyway, I mean, you look here at the map and you see different urbanized areas, yeah, and here you really have to decide what is going to be included and what not. Okay, there is one little issue there, that if a sewer system is already there, you anyway have to collect it. And you have to give it an appropriate treatment. So here you can look at what are the distances between these areas, and if they are bigger than 350 meters, then it is a separate agglomeration. Then still you can decide to build one wastewater treatment plant and to connect these agglomerations to one wastewater treatment plant, but it is not wise to then draw the line around it and say everything within this line is one agglomeration. It's going to cost you money. Here you see that very clearly. Here we have drawn these areas apart from the upper left is one agglomeration, about 8,000 people. Okay, falls in the category 8,000. If you go to the other two there, they are just above 2,000. So anyway, they need to be, yeah, they fall under directive because they are bigger than 2,000. and Village is 6,000 and would be a separate agglomeration on itself. So we have defined these as 1, 2, 3, 4 agglomerations. The yellow one, at the moment that we take the yellow one, which is 475, we can include it in Village, but we don't have to include it in Village. So it is a choice which is made during the feasibility study. For the agglomerations, we have to define what the total population equivalent is. And that is sometimes misunderstood. But it includes everything in the most busy week. So if you have a tourist area like Ohrid, then it is Ohrid at the most busy week in August. That is the PE value. Be lucky here in Macedonia that you don't have these coastal areas like in Croatia, where we have sometimes only 2,000 people in the wintertime and we have 10,000 people in the summertime. That means 5 times. That makes it very difficult to define your wastewater treatment plants. I take the whole sheet. Oh, wait a second. There is something for that. So for each of the agglomeration, this is not final result. Actually, it was a little bit, this is not final result of the project, final result of this activity, sorry to say. The existing situation for each agglomeration, we have a map for each agglomeration. We get data in this moment from the public utility companies. That gives a description of the existing infrastructure, defines what the gap is, looking at the total population equivalent which we have in the area. All these data are going into a database and finally will be delivered to the ministry as a project database. I said we are in the midst of collecting data. And we made a nice sheet for that, and public utility companies have seen meanwhile many of these sheets, because everybody is going to collect data, but normally we get the data in this form, if they are already there. Paper, paper, paper. But in many cases, we get this form. We call it the walking archive. The man who has been in the water company for already 25 or perhaps 40 years knows everything about it, but has it here in his head. If the guy dies, the walking archive is gone and nobody knows anymore what's underground. And actually, we would like to have the data in this way. So what we do, at least in our activity, is that everything we get, we put it in the computer and we make it available for later use in the ministry. And we do that with open source software, because at the moment that people are talking about GIS, which we are using in our project, then they are immediately thinking about Esri, of course. Esri, which costs you about €10,000 if you want to buy a license, and equally good software is freely available. Equally good software is freely available if you're talking about databases, so the whole system from a point of view of software doesn't have to cost you anything. So if somebody is telling me, no, we can't do that because we don't have the resources, at least the financial resources should not be a problem. It's only people and willingness. So we are in the midst of this process for as well water supply as for wastewater, and at the moment that all the data are collected and we can apply, let's say, the costing on the whole thing, then at that moment we have, let's say, the final project form or the project list with all the projects, including the activities and including the costs which are related to that. So we are really depending on the public utility companies to provide us the data. The system is completely set up and we can immediately get all these data in the system. Sorry, I go up on time because I forgot here something. Most of the data we will make available, of course, after discussion with the ministry, we will also make available via a web interface that even the public utility companies can see what we have there or what they have there. So basically, the project is about the directive-specific implementation plans. There are some additional activities related to that, water balance for the whole country, etc. But I didn't want to talk about that part. I wanted to talk about mainly this part of how are we defining agglomerations, how do we come to the directive implementation plans, and what is the role of these directive-specific implementation plans. Thank you.